Oldest in the state of Texas high. And we have it because of Carl and because he worked very hard to find it. To bring it down from the more northern south and to put it here. I don't know an organ in the city of Houston that is more perfectly suited to both the ambiance and the function of a space, and again, that is because of Carl. In addition to an organist, he also plays the violin. He does minor organ repairs for us all the time. You might not have known that because he is an expert on so many things, but especially how this specific instrument functions as a whole and in the room, and so you are in for a real treat to be able to hear him play. And on top of that, he is nice, and he is humble, and he's really, really smart. I cannot stress that enough. So please join me in welcoming Carl McAlilly.
Hand pumped at the time, and oh, like this? Closer. Oh, okay. So hand pumped, but then they installed eventually a water motor, which was just a hydraulic piston in the basement, run off city water, and churches back then got their water for free. So it used copious amounts of water. It was just hooked to the pump handle to go up and down and pump the organ. But in smaller towns, when the church services started, the water pressure would drop because of all the churches. And then I have a little book here written by a former 1926. Electricity had made its way even into small towns and churches, and at least to power motors. And so this is reminiscences of being a boy. It was usually young boys that were hired 10 cents, 15 cents to pump the organs during services, and it's very humorous. So it was built by the Hook and Hastings Company. The Hook, it was the two brothers, started out in the say 1830, making organs, and they lasted until 1872. So it was Elias and George Greenleaf Hook, E-N-G-G Hook, and became out of Boston, one of the most prominent builders, if not the prominent builder in the U.S. And eventually they took on Frank Hastings, who grew up on a farm. His father and grandfather had a large farm in Weston, just outside of Boston, now a suburb of Boston. He hated farming and got away into town and got a job training as a draftsman, and then got a job with the Hook brothers and rose through the ranks. He was apparently a good designer and had a lot of good taste for voicing the organ and case design and selling it, going out to clients, prospects, and selling the organs. So that they took him on as a full partner around 1870. So that's E&GG Hook and Hastings, it became. And then eventually they retired and passed away, and it became Hook and Hastings. So by 1893, the Hook brothers had passed away, and it was Hook and Hastings. He eventually moved the factory from central Boston, Tremont Street, out to the farm. His parents had passed away, and he had all that land. He built a large factory in Weston and they had a huge output at this time. He was a Unitarian and active in the Unitarian Church, and the church there in Weston had Hooke and Hastings. This book has a list of all the organs they made by opus number. Each organ had an opus number, and by geographically. And in Houston, First Presbyterian when it was downtown, had a large 3-manual Hooke and Hastings from 1894, 1 year after this one. And the First Church of Christ Scientists, Temple Beth Israel, and something called Shern Methodist. I don't know if that was a precursor of one of the,
First United Methodist Church.
Oh, it used to be Shern. Okay, it had a Hooke and Hastings. But Houston being a wealthy oil town, they had money, and so they built new buildings in some cases, and they all got new organs. So this one was in Georgetown, Kentucky, just outside of Lexington, in the Baptist Church, which has a close association. The church is right next to the campus of Georgetown Baptist College. And I've met several people who went to college there, and they would, if they were organists, they would also, their teacher played the organ in the Baptist church that had this organ, and they remembered it from back then.
What's the opus number?
It's Opus 1553, 1553. I found on YouTube one that I think it's within a 1 or 2 number, like 1555. So this is a stock model, meaning the keyboards and the chests and the pipes, they're pretty much, they would build these cookie cutters. The cases were almost always, there were a few set cases, but this one, for instance, when it first went into the church, there was a round, I guess you'd call it a rose window. So this one is sort of stretched out wider than it needs to be. It's got a lot of space here and here. It's very tight front to back, but they stretched it out wider and to accommodate the round window. Then later the church decided to move it to the front of the building, so it didn't really matter. So it's got more room than it needs, but they would build at a certain time of the year when they were less busy. They would just build 10 of these to have on hand for churches, and they would be ready to go, and then they might have to build a special case for it. So anyway, they were writing this book of the history of Georgetown Baptist, and the organ emeritus gave me a call, wrote a letter, and gave me a call, and I gave more information on it. But anyway, they have a chapter here on their organ, but it includes he rejoices in the fact that he didn't know it. I mean, it came up and he heard about this. So it has pictures of it here in our building. And here's sort of a picture half of it where you can see it for heaven. They had painted it brown and painted the paint. The pipes originally would be decorated with stenciling. You can see a little bit of the traces on there. And then they painted all white. And then we take this position that this would be the really bright colors and all might not touch. So this was just the blank metal. This metal is zinc. It had been, case pipes would be a high content tin. They have to be stiff to be this big and stand up. But then tin is very expensive. But in Belgium, the Industrial Revolution there, they started producing a lot of this good quality zinc cheap and exporting. And there's one organ that has the stamp still, a Hooke organ that has the stamp from Liège in Belgium. And interestingly enough, that organ eventually, the church closed down, so it was up for relocation, and a big Catholic church in Belgium contracted to have it restored and sent. So it's the organ from America, but has pipe metal from Belgium. Anyway, I'm digressing. Oh, so the miracle, in the start of this little sort of miracle, they got it in 1893, and then by 1967, they replaced it with a Chance electropneumatic organ, wouldn't be mechanical action. And I still don't know how it came that this teenager, David Bottom, anyway, they let him, I think they let him have it for free if he would get it out of there, and how he knew how to take one of these apart and to preserve it. He took it down so that usually when these were replaced, sometimes the new builder would take some of it and maybe use some of the pipework. A lot of times they were just thrown in the landfill. So this one survived being replaced. And then for a while, it was set up in Lexington in Christ Church Cathedral. They had a big pipe organ up front, but in their rear gallery, it sat there. If you've heard of John Leanhart, Engines by Ingenuity, he had a show that he talked about singing in the choir there in Christ in the 1960s. So I sent him an email and asked if he remembered an organ being in the back. He said yes, they would sing there with that organ just for that spatial setting. So he remembered the organ. He was surprised that it was here in Houston. And then it was taken down and was in the cathedral domain. It's like the diocesan church camp out in the country, but had a big chapel, and it was there for a while. And then it was just in storage till we acquired it in 1999. I had a stint at one point in my life where I worked as an apprentice in a pipe organ building in New England, pipe organ company in New England that specialized in restoring old organs like this. And a fellow I worked with there, Brad Rule, had relocated to Tennessee and started his own outfit. So when we were looking for one, I asked him if he knew it. Well, we found one in Dallas we were thinking about, but it was electric action, and he specializes in this mechanical action. But I asked him, would you help us, take that one down and set it up? And he said, I'm really not interested in getting, doing the electric action sort of thing. So we kept looking. But then a week or so later, he called me back. He said, well, this organ, which I thought had long since been sold, I found out, I met the guy at an event, and he said he still has it. So he said, would you be interested? You think your people would be interested? And I thought, I've already sold them on this other organ. And we've been in talks. How can I can't just throw this at them and say, you want this even older organ, 100-year-old organ that's in storage, you can't see it. I said, well, I'll just talk to maybe Jim and Fran. Well, I hadn't realized Jim had the experience of being, when y'all were at St. Stephen's, he was there when they were getting their English mechanical action organ. He was going to be in England for Brown and Root work. And so the St. Stephen's people said, oh, will you go by to the factory and see how our organ's coming along? So he did. So he had seen an organ being built and was, being an engineer, was fascinated by it. So once I mentioned this to Jim, he took the ball and ran. and that was going to be it. So it all worked out that way. And anyway, the neat thing about this organ, even though it's small, it covers all the bases for what a big pipe organ would be. It's small, spatially, yes, it looks big, but it's actually, there are 10 stops, 10 sets of pipes, which is considered fairly small. But it does sound big because each stop does a lot of work, fills a lot of different, checks a lot of boxes for what a good-sized pipe organ should do. So it covers all the classes, the 4 classes of types of pipes. There's pipes like what you see here that have a mouth, sort of like a whistle. They're called flue pipes. And you break those down. And then you've got reed pipes, which instead of being a whistle, it's sort of like a kazoo. It's got a little metal shallot with a beating reed that makes sort of a buzzy sound. So we've got one reed stop, the oboe, and then in the whistle types, flute types, we have principal sound, Okay. This will be on the open diapason, the foundation principal sound on the organ. And it is big. It's a big, beefy sound, and it's the foundation for, you know, what the other sounds are sort of built on. The biggest pipes you see here are the lowest notes on the open diapason. So you'll hear those. This piece gets down there, and the piece is called Contemplation. Sorry.
Okay, Mary Lee, you're in charge. What you do is turn it on like this. Turn it on. Make the noise.
How it does different things as it's lower, and then as it's higher, it gets to be very singing, and that's one instance of a stop doing different things, you know, foundation here, and then up here, really singing, bringing out a melody. This is called Joy, and it uses the oboe, the only reed stop, the one with the little buzzing sound. For about 10 or 15 years, I think from the 80s and 90s, he was the staff composer for Sesame Street. So. Oh. I don't know if you noticed, I was talking to Laura about this, Laura Mitchell. Juneteenth being celebrated in Galveston. And did you see Joe Biden spoke at the Reedy Chapel, AME Zion Church? It has a organ by E and G.G. Hook and Hastings from 1872. So it was when the Hook brothers were still alive. They may have still been coming down to the office some, but they were getting ready to retire. But that organ started out in Trinity Episcopal, and then in 1872, 20 years before this one, 21 years, it was in Trinity Episcopal. So somehow it got, I guess, well, the building, it went through the hurricane, but I guess it was probably in a rear gallery. In 1913, they replaced that organ, and the Reedy Chapel acquired it and went in there. So, and then around in the 1970s, a Texas builder restored it. So when the church had acquired this organ, but before the building was finished and before this was being renovated, but hadn't been done, we had no way to go see it. Some of the friends said some people wanted to know if is there any other organ in this area that would be slightly comparable. So I knew of that one, and so we arranged to go down. So it was. Is Joyce still in here? Did you go on that? No. Okay, but I know the Clinton, the Gambles did, and Laura Mitchell, and Richard Huff, and I think Martha Murphy. Okay, Jay Hooker, and then of course the Averas. But we went down there and heard the organ there. I saw in Hurricane Ike that a window blew in there, but anyway, the organ's still there. But I saw during the service they didn't use it; the lid was closed, but it's still there. And I think it's one of the oldest organs in Texas, but same builder. Any questions about anything? I have a couple of more pieces I sort of like to play with, but not too long.
How is it not functioning?
Wait, what is that?
Breathe.
Oh, well, I'm not sure. It may be functioning, but it just.
Jason talks about this one being the oldest function.
Jason?
Jason talks about this one being the oldest
Oh,
function.
okay.
In Houston.
Well, it's definitely also I know in what I know, well, up in, there's a couple in the Dallas area. But, and then in Fredericksburg, in the old St. Mary's Catholic Church, there's one about this at old in there. Well, it's not, you haven't heard too much organ music. These are two pieces I can't show off for you very well. This first one is it's from the 8 mobile pieces by Jean Longley. He lived from 1907 to 1991. He's from a group of, there's a number of blind organists, very prominent blind organists. Blind because the School for the Blind in Paris that Braille started, one of their philosophies were for any student who had a gift for music to really get the best teachers from the Paris Conservatory to come and teach them. So you had Jean Longley, Gaston Litez, Louis Vierne, André Marchal, and there are more of world-class organists and composers, and Jean Longley is one of them. So this is a set of 8 modal pieces, and this one is in the mode of D, meaning if you play all the notes on D with no sharp, that would be the scale. These are from the scales from the medieval time, before we just went to having minor and major as the predominant ones. There was a mode for each key if you only played white notes. So this is the first one, and it's just 3 stops independent. The open flute, melodia, the string, you'll get to hear the string finally, the viola, and then the pedal, this is rare. The pedal, its only stop is a low flute, big flute stop, just sort of like the double bass sound. But here it's used independently. And, there's sort of both of these pieces are sort of sectional. You have a section with one color or rhythm, and another section with different, and they come back and forth, and they change a little handle all the French literature, modern 20th century, as well as back to Bach. You know, no problem. Any questions? So 4 classes, but even within those classes, even say the flute tone, yes, each stop is one basic sound, but the voicer can make that stop start out low, soft down here, and then make each pipe going up for each note louder, so that it had so when you play it, sort of a crescendo, or like on the oboe, it's sort of warmer down here. And then up here, one person who was an organist came here and says, up here it sounds more like a trumpet. It's really bright and it's just one stop. Yeah, just the so-called oboe sound, and then it doesn't really sound. Sort of oboe-ish, but. And then the string, I don't know, there was one section there where it was about very sort of thin sound. For some reason that was really popular in the Victorian, late 19th century. In fact, before it had the 2-foot, the other thing is each stop is at a different pitch. So the so-called 8-foot is unison pitch. I'm sorry. This is at unison. But you can also, I'm holding the same notes, but it sounds an octave higher. And then two octaves higher, where you can add those, they blend in combination. So this stop, really, you rarely play it by itself. You can make a solo, you can. And almost never this one by itself. It's to brighten the other. So this is our big, beefy foundation. And brightness. And more brilliance. So in flutes, then we have the one that's open. And then this one, the stop one. A little more delicate. And then there's an octave, so this one's an octave higher than that. Did that answer?
About the truck ride to get the organ. I understand there were actually hardly any shock absorbers on the truck, that y'all had a hard time, and then I just can't visualize how this was packed up or not, and how it got in one truck, and.
I think the issue with the truck, part of it was that Jim wound up. The one he wound up with is one of these that has a lift, a motorized lift, like a platform. It's a U-Haul truck with a platform, and I think that was as opposed to just having a ramp. And I don't think Jim I don't remember us talking about it. We just wound up with that, and that's very heavy. So when the truck was empty going over there, this was in 1999 still, December. And I-10 going over between here and Baton Rouge, it was you remember those segmented things that boom, boom, boom? Well, that's bad enough in a car, but in this truck, it set up some sort of sympathetic variation that it was doing this. So even after hitting it, you would be bouncing a little bit. So Jim eventually found a speed at which it didn't do that too badly. And then once we got past Baton Rouge, it was okay. All these panels, you remember when we were sanding them, before they put it back together. So this had been painted brown, chocolate brown, and it had been stripped of that at some point, but it was just the bare oak. But it's beautiful oak. Some call it tiger oak or quarter sawn oak with the veins that you see. Anyway, decided to sand that and then finish it, and so we had it all over at the Avera's house, just out on sawhorses. I know Clinton was there, sanding it and then eventually finishing it. But so anyway, all the panel comes out, and pretty much paneling lies up flat. All the pipes come up, and you lay them in trays and tape them down with masking tape. And anyway, pretty much everything just goes to where it can be laid flat one way or another, and then stacked. So it's just sort of like lumber, and it fills up a truck sooner or later. I guess the action parts are more delicate. You have to give them special padding and stuff. But is Paul here? Oh yeah, Paul and Clinton and Bradley on a Sunday morning, they took the Sabbath in vain and worked setting up, well, it was Sunday morning, so it was before church service. But there's pictures of you guys getting it, the initial setup.
I was told by Fran Avera some years ago when I first came that when they were the original committee of the church that decided we needed to have all we could afford was an electric organ. That was it. That was the decision that was made. And what she said was, in the meeting, Carl, sweet little Carl, finally said, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Fran said.
I wasn't in the committee. They have the good sense not to have me in the, but we had, one reason your organist before me was Bruce Power. Bruce Powers or Power? But I had met him, and he knew that I had the little background at Andover organ. So when he was going to no longer be the organist, he recommended me because he thought I might be useful, and because he knew y'all would be trying to find some sort of organ for the new building. But it was thought that with the small budget that was left over for an organ, that electronic would really be the only, which at the time, if you went out to the major organ building companies that everybody knows about, they would say, okay, our price per stop is, at that time would have been at least 10,000, but more likely 20,000 and up per stop. And the church had 25,000, so that would have bought them 1 or 2 stops. But anyway, when Jim and Fran said, sadly, we can only afford an electronic at this point, we hope we can save money down the road. And I said, well, will you give me some time, 2 weeks, to call around and see what I can find in the way of a used organ that can be refurbished for that price? And that's when they said, okay. And that's when we started finding some that were possibilities. So Bradley was not busy at this time, and he loves these organ too. So he managed to, do it for the budget of the church. I think the church paid $10,000 for the organ in storage, and then that left. Yeah, and then some other folks chipped in to get us over the line, and but I may have had that reaction with Jim and Fran, but it was just the links in the chain. First, that young teenager who rescued the organ, and then Bradley, who's spent his life doing this sort of work for not making much money and developing a lot of expertise. That was that chain, and then somebody who would listen to me, because usually I say these things and I'm just not listened to, which is probably best when you're dealing with an organist. But I had folks that listened, and here it is.
Carl, I think that I remember that there was some discussion about putting the organ at the front of the sanctuary.
Yeah, at the front.
Talk,
And this was all, the committee, had worked with much, intention and thought and about the architecture of the room and a certain aesthetic. And then the word kept coming, oh, it's going to be a Victorian organ case. So you think of the hall boy with all doodads and, scrolls, but it's rather sober, really. But that was the idea. And they said, we can't, it can't be visible. So they was going to turn it sideways and then build a wall around it, so you couldn't see. But the sound here, the sound would have just gone up there. And anyway, so we had lively discussions about that. And then because Bradley said he really wasn't interested in working on something that it wouldn't sound good. And then pretty soon people would say, okay, this organ is not a success, we'll replace it. And he didn't want that to happen to it. But he said I couldn't have backed out. I had signed a contract, but I told him not. So there was a lively committee meeting. I was actually invited. And in the meantime, Fran said that Jim, he was at work, and she told him, he got the fax, the letter. People, they were corresponding by fax. He got Bradley's letter, and he went and threw up. He was so upset. Fran told me this. So he left work. He went home, and he built a scale model of the room with the organ that could be moved around. And so for the meeting that night, and then there was lively discussion, and then they said, okay, you can leave, Carl. We're gonna. And so then they made the decision to put it back here. And I remember one of the dear people there who was on the other side of the thought process we were going through. Some year, when we had the organ dedication, that person came up to me and said, Carl, back then when we had that discussion, he said, I was wrong and you were right. Anyway.
And isn't it something like the day before? So the roof wasn't tall enough, as Jeannie said, in the Time for Children, to put the organ here. And it was like the day before it was going to start being built. It was decided the organ would go back here, and they had to make the roof taller.
I don't think, anyway, it was a short time, it was a last minute. I don't think that we're at the point of putting the roof up.
No, they weren't putting the roof up, but they were about to put the walls, studs.
So there was plans for some little room here.
There was going to be a choir room off this exit.
I heard there was going to be a choir.
Oh, it's oral tradition, Carl. Who knows? I don't.
Anyway, I didn't even know that happened, or if I did, I wouldn't. But yeah, so to accommodate that height was to raise it 1 foot
Yeah.
and then
Do away with the room. Exactly. To make up for the money, in case this isn't clear, to make the roof a foot taller, we lost whatever room that would have been. We obviously don't need it. We don't know what it was.
I don't think the height certainly.
Well, Carl, I want to say thank you so much. What a gift you have been and are.